Welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethlie.
And we are the Youngs.
We're so glad you've joined us today.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for giving us a little break last week. Sorry about that, but we had a grandson that was born. He's 2 months early.
Yes.
And so we were not able to get together and record because Bethlie was in one place and I was in another one. And so we returned and gave an episode from our very first one where we talked about our family verse.
Yes.
And hope you enjoyed that repeat and that was a blessing to you. All is well with the grandbaby, though, and we're very thankful for that. God is very good.
Spend some time in the NICU, but little James Russell, born at 4 pounds 6 ounces at 34 weeks, is doing well.
He is doing very well. Well, we are starting some new series here in the coming weeks. One of the things we want to do over the next probably 5 or 6 weeks maybe, is just talks about some practical advice for raising our children.
Right.
And it's the one thing that we get asked about all the time. How would you do this? Or how would you handle that? Or what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? So Beth and I just have put together just some practical advice. We're talking about pitfalls in parenting, pitfalls to avoid, just some questions maybe to consider. Some must-have goals, and just some practical direction. So hope you'll join us for these coming weeks, and of course we hope you'll share it with somebody.
Right.
And let others know about it, all those kind of things. And then in coming weeks here, we're wanting to do an episode or two about Christian weddings. We're working on that, and talk to you about what is a Christian wedding and why is it important and should it be in the church and just a ton of questions.
Should
about
we
weddings.
even need to have that conversation? Right.
Yeah, so it's a big one, an important one. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're somewhere in here going to do a very heavy one, a little bit more sober, but we do want to talk about this idea of purity in relation to marriage, adultery, and the devastation that can come from that,
Right.
Why it's so devastating, why it's, why we need to protect ourselves, and also just some practical advice on how we can overcome that kind of an issue.
Overcome or maybe even avoid.
Absolutely. We want to avoid, but if
Yes.
there is an issue, we can also overcome.
Yes.
So those are kind of the things where we're headed, and hope you'll stay tuned with us every Monday and just continue to like and share. We're very thankful for all of you.
Absolutely.
And I know we say this a ton, but honestly, if you have texted us or emailed us and have not heard, from us, then somewhere in the process, we've lost it. And I know someone reached out to me this week with a question, and they had actually tried to message us from our website 2 or 3 times, and it never came through. So probably meant it, automatically went to, who knows, spam or something.
Right.
But if you don't hear from us, please go to social media, send us a message from there. Normally we always get those, but we would still just love to hear from you. KeepingItYoungPodcast.com. And if we can help you in some way, reach out. We'd be glad to do that.
Absolutely.
All right. As all of you know, when it comes to parenting, there's, just several verses that stand out. Ephesians 6:4. Want to quote that one for us?
Right. That's, and you fathers provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And I was thinking too, a lot of parents don't think of Ephesians 6:1 as a parenting verse.
Sure.
But it really is, where it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Those children have to learn obedience from someone, and more than likely they're going to learn that from their parents.
Yes, and so even that is a parenting verse. Of course, if you follow my blog, I've been blogging some in recent weeks about the Proverbs 22:6 verse, which is focused on training. Train
Yes.
up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart from it. And just a quick little aside there, it's so easy to take that verse and focus on the exception or, well, this should have happened but didn't happen, and miss the fact that the truth of the verse is that we need to train our children.
Right.
And training is God's plan. It's so important because what you find in the Bible is that training is God's plan for bringing them up, for getting them down the road, to cherish
Right.
them and nourish them is the idea of that, to really care for them. And then that admonish and so forth, that's about teaching them and training them and discipling them.
Yes.
And the verse in Proverbs, we train up a child in the way he should go, for 2 reasons. The idea of the phrase "the way he should go" is about the mouth in reference to a picture of the appetite. So training is so important, moms and dads, because we're training our children for the appetites they will have.
Right.
And we're training our children for adulthood, because when he says, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it, that's letting you know the goal. That's not trying to confuse you about, exceptions and things. It's trying to let you know that the goal parenting, the goal of training is that our children will be so well trained that when they're older, they will go in the right way.
True.
And so
yes.
it's a tall order, no doubt about
So,
it.
yes, it is. I read someone's Instagram post today, and she said that parenting is the most beautiful and the hardest thing you will ever do.
Sure.
And it's very true.
It is so true. And I was with Bethlie in some shop somewhere along the way, and they said that parenting, I saw a little sign that said, parenting is like being pecked to death by a chicken. And I have no idea what that
if
means.
you have more than one child, it's like being pecked to death by a bunch of little chickies.
Yeah, a whole herd of chickens.
A
Are
whole
they a herd? A whole
I think
herd.
they're a flock.
Oh, a whole flock of chickens. Yeah, that's the word we were looking for there.
It is, but what you were saying, the focus on Proverbs 22:6, if you get anything out of this, hopefully you're not like, oh, they're using Proverbs 22:6. Oh, that verse is so controversial. Don't let it be controversial, because what we're focusing on is the important part of training your children.
Absolutely. And moms and dads, there's a ton of you in different locations. I mean, as far as seasons.
Okay.
Some of you are, have a baby, and this is all new, and you're already training whether you realize it or not.
Yes.
Sometimes we think, well, we're just changing a diaper, but your voice, your tone, your, response to the child, and even how, you respond in the middle of the night when they're cranky or whatever, you're always training. You're modeling, the right way to live. Your tone is modeling.
Yes.
And when you're correcting, or, you're changing your voice a little bit to give a no,
right.
Or even a more stern no.
Yes.
You're training.
Right.
And if you have toddlers, you're in that season where you just feel like, oh my goodness, what in the world is happening? But it's a good season, because what a time to train. I think our culture often underestimates how much little ones actually do understand.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and how much they actually do get. And I don't know if my brother listens to this or not, but he has a little boy that he's adopted, and he's only probably 2, isn't he?
Yes.
But you know what? He was with my mom the other day, and he walked into the kitchen, and he was counting things on her fridge. Out loud, he counted to 10. And then he, later he was playing with his trucks, and he sang the ABCs. He knew his ABCs. And the fact of the matter is, no child knows stuff like that without training.
Right. Someone has taught him that.
And it works.
Yes.
This is God's plan for us. And some of you have, like tweenies, or, you have teenagers, or your kids are in elementary school. And some of you, just God love you, you have them all over the place. You got a baby and a toddler and a tweenie and a teenager and a college student. The whole point is training. And Bethany and I just want to encourage you about it. So are you ready to just jump into the notes?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So that's why it's important. But let's start with just, a reminder that there are some pitfalls we should avoid. Moms and dads, it's so easy to fall into these pitfalls.
It is. And I think even speaking culturally, because we are so easily influenced by unbiblical culture, or maybe extra biblical culture, because we are so inundated with social media.
Right.
And it has been proven that the younger generation is more apt to go to social media for advice, for even research, than they are to go to, say, the Word of God, or to an older person and say, hey, how did you train your children? How can I train this child? And so we are so influenced by unbiblical culture, even in the church. And so we need to just give a little heads up about some things we need to avoid.
And do be careful. Do be careful about going to the internet, because if you know much about social media at all, social media is designed to get likes, to get interest. So it's typically more emotionally charged than it is truth charged.
Yes.
And so anybody can post on there. People who have no children can post on there an emotionally charged video that gets shared 1,000 times.
Right.
Or 1,000,000 times if they're an influencer.
Yeah.
But they may actually have no proof that they've ever raised a child, or even know how to raise a child, and may in fact, what they're sharing, because it's emotionally, charged, it's funny, sometimes people will share things and embrace an emotion that has nothing to do with truth.
Right.
So all of us have to be very careful. That's a pitfall to avoid.
Yes.
Getting your information in the wrong place.
Absolutely.
Here, if you have younger children, let's talk about younger children for just a minute.
Yes.
There's a couple of pitfalls that seem to be very big in younger children.
Yes.
And one of them is this one. This is almost hard to say, but it's so true. Laughing when I should be training is a pitfall to avoid.
Well, it is true that our babies can be so funny. They can do the funniest things. And even when they're, when their sin nature is coming out, as an adult, it can be comical to watch that little one, whether she's a pre-toddler or a toddler, or he's a preschooler. We can look at them and think that is hilarious. They are so funny. And we start to laugh and miss the opportunity for training when we should be.
Yeah, and even go back to the social media thing. Sometimes people will, videotape their child being snarky, or we would say when I was young, we would say they were being snotty,
Or sassy.
or sassy. And it's so easy to turn that into a humorous video to where it's like, hey, watch this. If you say this to the child, they respond snarky or sassy or whatever,
Right.
and find that hilarious. But moms and dads, if you train your child to respond in that way and you celebrate that, you are really falling into a huge pitfall.
Yes.
So laughing when we should be training is probably one of the easiest pitfalls, because all of us parents have a tendency to do that.
Right. And it's not that I don't want all of you parents out there to be like, well, we need to take life so very seriously. And even when our child is being hilarious, we can't laugh. There are times when they're tiny, tiny, that maybe you just need to turn around so that you can get a little bit of a chuckle and then turn back around and face your child and do the training. When our children got older, David would say things like, you know what, I might be laughing because that was a little bit funny, but you're still in trouble.
Absolutely. I was just sitting here thinking of that. And because our whole heart was, we didn't mind enjoying life.
Right.
We don't mind laughing at things that are funny. In fact, we do. We maybe laugh too much sometimes. But we always looked for humor. We always laughed. Nothing
Yes.
wrong with going, oh my word, can you believe she just said that, or he just did that, or that they just reacted like that. And it's fine to while you're smiling in your heart or even on your face, it's also important to train.
Yes.
So avoid that pitfall if you have younger children. And then how about this one? Allowing life's busyness to hinder training.
Oh, and that is so hard.
Oh my goodness, no
Mamas
kidding.
of tiny, tiny little ones, you are just going, and it can be so easy to just, maybe it's the fourth time that day that your toddler is getting into whatever you don't want him to get into. And you are just like, okay, I'm just done. I can't do it anymore.
And we, refer there to, that's the idea. Even moms that stay at home know how busy life can be.
Yes.
And some of you that listen to us, the fact is, you work long hours and your child is with a babysitter or with grandma or at a daycare or something
Right.
like that. And you got a whole new level there.
Yes.
Because you are already so busy in your work that you're separated from your little one. And when you're so busy in your work that you're separated from your little one, the tendency is you don't want to come home and train. You want to come home and love on the kid because you've been apart from the kid all day.
Yeah.
And the thing that's important, this is a pitfall to avoid. We cannot allow life's busyness to prevent us from training. We just
Right.
can't. And you got to come home, and maybe one of the things you could do is change your thinking on that and realize that even though I've been away from you all day today, it is still my responsibility to train. And Bethlie and I, of course, we would not split hairs over things like this, but we do believe that it's always best when our children are younger, especially if at least mom can be home with them. And so if you can at all, live on one income. If you can at all, moms, if you can, and dads, if you can, change the budget, drive an older car, move into a smaller house. If you can make changes and save for 5 or 6 or 7 years of your child's life, and until they're 7 or 8 at the very least, if you can take 5 or 6 years, maybe 7 years, and mom is always there, and dad comes home and he picks up where mom is, and they parent together. I'm telling you that is very helpful, because otherwise life just gets so busy we don't train.
Right. And it is harder if your child is away from you all day. And my heart goes out to you, mamas. If you do need to work, we're not at all saying that you are in the wrong if you need to work. You and your husband can decide that, or you single moms, you of course have to work.
Of course, have to. No
and
doubt.
so our heartbeat is not to put you down at all, but it is difficult when they have been with maybe grandma all day or a sitter all day who maybe does let them do things that you don't want them to do in the home. And then when you get home, to have the energy and the consistency to be like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to train. So just avoid that. Just be very careful about getting too busy to train. And I understand it's really hard. I was a stay-at-home mom, and it can be really hard.
Yeah, and friends, the culture we're living in is just so unfriendly to this, because for one thing, the inflation is going up, and
Yes.
it's things can be so expensive. It's like, I can barely make ends meet. And so as much as possible, spend as little as possible so you don't have to work more than necessary.
Right.
And so you do have time to parent. If you're parenting little ones, this is very important.
It is.
And so just a couple of pitfalls there. How about if your kids are older?
Well, we forgot one I had added after the notes were already written. Sorry. In my head.
She's rewriting my notes, y'all.
But sometimes a pitfall that parents have with younger children is that they think they've got plenty of time.
Oh, that's right. We did talk about this one.
Yes, we've got plenty of time. They're still very, very little. I don't really need to correct that yet because I'm not really sure that he understands that I'm going to be correcting him. And so we're going to give it a little more time. And honestly, parents, your children come home from the hospital with their sin nature. They're born with a sin nature, and we know that from the Bible. We also know that training can begin right away. That doesn't mean that you're going to discipline your newborn baby. It just means that you start training maybe with your scheduling, maybe with you being a stay-at-home mom. Maybe you're training with the tone of your voice. I know when our little ones, when we would diaper them, as they started to get older and would start to wiggle around, or maybe to show that they did not want their diaper changed,
Sure.
they would have a little bit of a temper in the way that they were crying. We could train them by the sound of our voice and maybe with the way that we would put our hands on them and say, no, you're going to lay still. Mama wants you to lay still. I would just hold their little legs and say, lay still. And with the tone of the no that you use, you get their attention. Even if they're 3 or 4 months old, you can get their attention. So, and that just goes all the way through. So don't think, well, my 1-year-old doesn't really understand. Your 1-year-old does understand. They can hear by the tone of your voice. I know when we were just out visiting Josh and Bethany and little Ellie Joy. Ellie Joy is
That's our granddaughter.
And she is almost 14 months old. So, but I know that they have a little dog in their house, little Hope, and Bethany has taught Ellie the word gentle. We are gentle with Hope. And so Ellie's only, at a year old, she knows when she's around Hope, her mama will say, oh, gentle, Ellie, gentle, and she will pet her very softly. So that is just an example
Absolutely.
of a little one can be trained.
Sure. And don't ever forget that, because you are, moms and dads, you're training. And when you are just illustrating, you see, and it's that pitfall. The pitfall, well, they're just kids. They're just little. They can, when they get older. But don't wait, because if you try to train them at a time when they do understand, they may decide that, I don't agree with you.
Right.
And so you get started earlier because you're trying to get them very soon in habits of obedience and habits of proper response.
Yes.
Avoid those pitfalls. Those are huge pitfalls.
Yes.
Any others about the younger children?
Well, the earlier you start, the better. And we're not saying if you haven't started training and you have a 7-year-old that, oh, well, too late. No, it's not too late. It's just going to take a little bit more time.
Absolutely.
Because they do have a mind of their own.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the pitfalls of older kids while we have a few more moments here. Because as your children start getting older, there's a couple of other pitfalls that apply to them. What's the first one?
Okay. Handling things by reaction rather than by training.
Now, this one is hard.
It is.
Because it is so natural in the culture we live in that is crazy busy and crazy distracted. And by distracted, our phones, our Instagram reels, the list never ends. Now you can watch games on your wrist. And, there's always another game. There's always another newsreel. There's always another ding or, a buzz.
An alert.
Something's always demanding our attention. And children are the ones really suffering because of that. Because we tend to react rather than train. Training just takes time. It takes thinking. It takes talking. And it's a whole lot easier just to react. It's a whole lot easier just to yell at a kid, hey, stop that right now. And or what is wrong with you?
Right.
So we can really raise our voice and say things that there's no real answer to. What is wrong with you is easy to say, but the kid's not going to answer that. It's not going to be, an explanation. Well, Mom, I was designed by you and Dad, and therefore I have your personality. I mean, there's no legitimate answer to that.
Yes.
That is a reaction. But what a pitfall. It's a huge pitfall. Examine yourself just a moment, you that are listening. Do you tend to react or do you tend to train? Instead of reacting and, dropping everything all over a kid and just unloading on him, do you stop and address situations and say, I want to
Right.
show you how to do that differently. One of the things I think we learned and that we've done many times is just in the middle of a situation to very calmly say to one of the kids, hey, excuse me, is that how you respond to a brother? Is that how you respond to your sister? Is that how you say that?
Right.
You need to say that again, but say it in the right way. And our kids, when you have a larger family, it does happen. They begin to find humor in those kind of things. And so, they can get silly about it, but at the same time, even when they're getting a little silly, and maybe they'll over dramatically say it. But the point of the matter is they're learning that, the way I just responded was wrong.
Right.
So what a pitfall there, handling things by reaction rather than training. What's a couple of others?
Failing to build a relationship with the child.
Yeah, as your kids get older, this goes back to that busyness thing. That probably applies across the board, doesn't it? And it's so easy to, when they become teenagers, to start thinking, hey, they got their friends. And yet relationships always, help me out here, they take time.
They do.
They take a lot of talking.
They do.
And they take common interests.
They do.
And so moms and dads, you have to keep working at that.
Yes, and it is so much easier to train. A child takes training from you. They take discipline, direction, and guidance from you so much better if they have that affectionate relationship with you.
So don't forget to have fun with your children. Don't forget to laugh.
Yes.
Don't forget to touch. Don't forget to say I love you. Don't forget
Right.
to give hugs.
Yeah.
Don't forget to drop everything and listen when you can tell they're wanting to talk.
Yeah. Hopefully, as parents, we all do know that it's a bad thing if the only time you ever interact with your child is to train them or to give them some disciplinary action.
Sure. And let's finish these here while we
Okay.
have the time. Here's a couple of other pitfalls if you have older kids. Inconsistency. It's amazing to me that kids will go all over you for inconsistencies and, of course, overlook it in their own life.
Of course.
And of course, but don't let that frustrate you. I have said to my boys on several occasions in, discussion issues, I've said to them, one of the things you're going to have to learn is to be at least as hard on yourself as you are other people.
Yes.
And when we are at least as hard on ourselves as we are other people, that can really help us. But
Right.
in raising children, inconsistencies can be huge.
Right. They will happen. And as your children get older, they will point them out. But don't let that be the norm. Let it be the norm that you consistently give training and direction.
Excellent. So inconsistency, what's the next one there?
Lack of clarity.
This is a huge pitfall.
It is.
Not being clear.
Right. I know sometimes I've expected our children to do something and all of a sudden they're not doing it or they're off doing something else. And I'm like, hey, I ask you. And they're like, well, I didn't really know what you wanted me to do there. And you weren't around for me to ask or whatever. And so clarity is so important.
Yeah. And you have to, be clear. The idea there is be clear with your expectations
Yes.
and talk through your expectations and maybe
Yes.
even predetermine the what's the right word? Punishments
Yeah.
if the expectations aren't
The
met.
consequences for unmet
consequences.
expectations.
So you
Yes.
just got to be really clear. I know that sometimes you ladies and just the way God has designed you, we always joke about the communication differences of men and women. And by that, I mean, everybody jokes about it. It's
Right.
on Instagram Reels. It's on, every conference you go to, they'll have jokes about the differences. And,
Right.
And it is very true. Like it's easy, for a lady to speak a little more generally. So mamas, be aware of that. So, I know sometimes my wife has said things like, hey, the trash is full. And her heart was saying, come take out the trash.
Right.
But what the kids heard was, oh, the trash is full.
Right.
And so we have to clarify expectations. We have to be willing to, make sure we're communicating to say to them, John, take out the trash. Sarah, come do these dishes. And when you give clear expectations, then your children don't feel frustrated because they know
Right.
exactly what you're expecting. And if they don't do it right, moms and dads, don't get frustrated with that. If you have to show a kid 15, 20, 25, or 3 years of time, this is how we do that. This is how we do that. This is, do it again. This is how we
Right.
do that. And nobody gets angry. You don't get angry in parenting because God gives you 18 years to do it. Maybe in our culture, 23 years to do it.
Or more.
And so these are just pitfalls pitfalls to avoid. I think we have time for one more. Throw one more at us there.
Failing to teach.
That's so simple. I mean, I almost feel that's
It is.
elementary to
You
say it.
cannot say to your 5-year-old, hey, I want you to match up all the socks if you have not trained them to match up all the socks and fold them the way you want them folded.
It's a huge pitfall when we know that we want our kids to do something, but we don't teach them how to do it.
I'm sorry, that just made me laugh. It's a huge pitfall if they don't learn to match socks. That's all I was just, because I'm thinking of all the people out there who probably just throw their socks in a drawer and don't care.
I don't mean that was a huge pitfall, matching your socks.
Yes.
I mean, it's a huge pitfall to avoid
Yes.
in failing to train your
It
children.
is in the Young household. We
And
match
to
our
teach.
socks.
Yes, we do.
Amen.
Yes, we do. And as you can see, my wife feels very strongly about that. And I don't even match my socks. My socks have to be folded all in the same direction.
That's right.
I tend to have this perfectionistic thing going
Yes,
on.
yes.
I blame it on God. He's the one that designed me.
Here we go.
And,
yes. We are off track big time, and it was my fault.
It
Sorry.
was, but you got me off track. So we're out of time, but here's just where we wanted to start it. There are pitfalls to avoid. Examine your own life and just think, have I fallen into any pitfalls?
Mm-hmm.
Have I allowed any of these into my life? Anything I can pick up there? And so, kind of where you are can vary. If you're raising teenagers and all your kids are teens, of course, the toddler thing won't apply to you. But there are pitfalls in every season of training children, and we have to make sure we crawl out of those pitfalls. We have to crawl out of those holes.
Well, I would say in any season of parenting, there is always room for evaluation.
Absolutely. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you join us next week, and we'll continue this conversation about raising and training our children. All right? Any final word?
Nope, just
Okay.
serve the Lord with gladness.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.